morning. So, what I'm gonna give you a little bit about, fruit and nut tree, how I've learned to manage my orchard. So, yes, I've gone through WSU's, orchard management class, and I've done quite a bit of research, and, okay, you're stuck with, here's how I do it.
Well, we feel like it works.
Yeah,
Right.
well, it works for me, you know. And I was talking to somebody who said, yeah, if you go to 100 different orchard management people, they all have their own approach. And so you're stuck with mine. This is what I manage, except, yeah, I've got some, kiwis, I've got blueberries, honeyberries, raspberries, that I also work with. So if you have questions on these, you'll notice, there's no plums up there. My wife and I don't eat plums, and so, yeah, I'm not a good one to ask about plum trees. First thing, yeah, experiment. So, I didn't bring my flagging tape, but when I'm up in my trees, yeah, I keep a little bit of flagging tape. When I try different things, I mark them so I can come back and take a look at them. You can see, yeah, I took out the plum, I took out, a couple of the, nut trees, and yeah, tried different figs. So this is kind of how our trees look. Pretty basic. The first thing I forgot to do is start my timer so I don't bore you guys. I tried, when I was looking at my trees, I got a lot of low branches. And I thought, oh wow, I can increase my production. So I let the low branches go. Yeah, so they get down there on the ground, they sit on the ground, when they get fruit on them, yeah, it didn't work. So I elevated those up. Another thing I tried, yeah, I've got 30 trees that I pruned, and it takes me a long time. And I thought, well, what happens if I prune half this year and half next year? So I started doing every other year pruning. You can see the water sprouts get away from me, and yeah, it just, I end up spending actually more time on a 2-year prune, so okay, I cut that out. The other one I'm doing is, so I had a couple big Chehalis apple trees, and they clear cut the property next to us. And so the apples were actually baking on the tree before we could get them harvested and what. They're very sun sensitive, they're a very light skinned apple. And so I took those out. And these are little columer trees. I don't know if you've been up to Catalyst, they're starting to deal with columer trees. A columer will get about 8 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. And so I put 6 in the same footprint, and it's just another way, I don't have to get up on ladders anymore. I keep trying different things, and that's the main thing, is experiment. You know, see what works for you, what doesn't work for you. This year I'm working with a little bit of baking soda. So I sat there and looked at my roof of my house, and yeah, if I put baking soda up there, it gets rid of the moss. Well, I have a lot of moss and that little, what is it, liverwort lichen that grows underneath the trees, and what? Baking soda kills all that. So I'm looking at that, and I get a lot of lichen growth on some of my trees. And so what I'm gonna try next, and I haven't done it yet, but is make a solution out of that and spray it on the tree. You gotta add a little bit of dish soap or something as a sticker to get it to stick, but experiment, don't be afraid of things. Yeah, Mary's gonna go over integrated pest management. So yeah, I'll just cruise through that. So today's topic, equipment. So we'll go through equipment. Cleaning is a big one for me, and I'll touch on that a little because I don't think Mary goes through that on her pest management. Of course, pruning, spraying, irrigation, fertilizer, and then Jeannie's gonna go over selection. So equipment, yeah, clippers. Ladders. Yeah, I finally broke down and got one of those little electric saws that's gotten me in more trouble. Yeah, trees tend to come down with those little electric saws. So these are orchard ladders. They're called orchard ladders. Yeah, they're much better than the little step ladders. At least in my orchard, I have moles. And so, yeah, the legs tend to drop in. And if you're on a step ladder, if you lose one leg, you tend to fall over. Where with these orchard ladders, it gets my heart going a little faster, but it just drops in and you only go about 6 inches. The other thing is you can see the leg actually can reach through trees, so it gives me far more flexibility on how I set up my ladder and how to get into the trees. So yeah, a good orchard ladder, I have two. I have a 10-foot and a 5-foot, and yeah, the 5-foot makes it easy to work under a tree, and then the 10-foot allows me to get up through the outside. Clippers, yeah, I don't use long pole loppers much. So they have, you know, the old thing was if you had anvil pruners, that's used for dead wood. And then bypass pruners are used for live wood. I went up to the Seattle Flower and Garden Show, what was it, 2 years ago or so? And I was talking to a guy who came up with these ratcheted pruners. It's an anvil, but it works like a bypass. And so if you want to try them, I brought some chunks of wood that you can give it a go, but it really saves my hands. Makes it far easier on pruning. I always keep a little collapsible saw with me when I'm up there. I found when I'm up on the ladders, anything I can keep in my pockets makes life easier, so I'm not going up and down. And then, of course, yeah, you need a good knife, and I'll go through knives here. Yeah, I have a thing on knives, so we'll get through those. So cleaning, you can see on the left there, I get a lot of leaf that's left on the branches. Yeah, I got a lot of Doug firs. You get all the rain, it wraps the leaves around the branch. So I go through and while I'm pruning, I clean all that stuff off. I have little gloves without fingertips that I work with. And yeah, I just peel all that off. Because while I'm cleaning, you find all the little egg cases. Where the leaf wraps around is where you'll get disease in that part. It holds the moisture there longer. So once you clean the tree, it dries a lot faster and saves far more help. Pruning, why do you prune? So you want to prune for light, for pest control, for increased fruit production, disease control. I tend to try to get my pruning done November and December. The temperature is better. I don't prune when it's going to freeze overnight. So if you prune when it freezes, you know, you're kind of selecting where you want to cut on that bud, and if it freezes, well then it freezes that bud. And so then your choice just changed due to pruning at the wrong time. So how do I prune this? And yeah, I get a lot of people asking, so I've got this great big standard tree and yeah, nobody's pruned it for the last 10 years or whatever, what do I do? Or I have these little ones that I just planted. I use the same approach on all of them. You remove the dead wood first, take that out, remove or clean diseased wood, get that taken care of. Remove rubbing branches, that's where you're gonna get disease in when the branches rub and it takes off that protective bark. Remove branches that are growing back into the tree, you know? And of course, you got all those water sprouts you wanna take out of there. Remove branches so light is what creates fruit. And so you gotta get light in there to the branches. And then the last part I finally do is I prune for balance and look, you know, is it a good looking tree? So I only do, there's two types of cuts. There's a thinning cut and a heading cut. And 90%, at least in my orchard now, 90% of my cuts are thinning cuts. So I'm taking the whole little branch off, I'm not heading it back. And so when you do a heading cut, you're doing that cut to promote branching. And so, and you gotta remember that, you gotta pick which bud you want to grow out, but realize generally the two in back of that are also gonna sprout and send out shoots. So next year you gotta come back and prune those back out. So there's a lot of great diagrams out there. So this one, yeah, predominantly that one shows heading cuts and very few thinning cuts. I figure out this little laser. So that's a thinning cut right there. It takes the whole branch out. These are all heading cuts. In this image, they're trying to promote more growth. It's a young tree. They're trying to get more branching going on. So a lot of people ask me, and I brought samples as to what's a bud look like that's gonna fruit, and what's a bud look like that's just gonna grow. So, yeah, that's a growth bud, and these are fruiting buds. And I've got examples that you can look at. So, okay, I get some magic button. And my help just ran away. How do I get back to this? Is there a backup button?
There might be.
No. Ah. All right.
Right.
Like magic.
Figure that out. So when I look at a heading cut, I come in here, you want to come across at an angle, and now that bud's gonna grow out that way. So you want to pick the direction you want your branch to go, and then realize that the buds below that, they're also gonna send out branches now. So you gotta come back next year and check which way things went and prove. I'm trying to make life easier. Jeannie will go over this. Yeah, rootstock selection and odds and ends. I'm slowly lowering my orchard. I'm getting older. I don't like to spend as much time on the ladders. So yeah, I've gone to dwarfs and semi-dwarfs. So you wanna prune right at the collars. You can see, okay, here, they left that little stub and it sprouted. And so if you leave that little nub there, now you gotta come back and prune. He lucked out, and there's just one little sprout coming up there. I'm gonna set that down. So, why I keep the knife is usually anything that's about the size of a dime or bigger that I cut off, and I don't do much of that. But you can see upper right, when you saw off a branch, you get that little bit of fuzz, so to say, on the bottom of the branch. And you take the knife and you clean all that off. And then you can see in the lower ones how that heals without having any of the sprouts come out.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of people ask me, gee, would you come prune my fruit trees? Well, yeah. The amount of time it takes me to go through a tree, you're not gonna pay that, and I'm not gonna make any money, so. But taking your time, is really important to go through, and it makes it so much easier when you don't have to come back and take all those little shoots off that have come around. So that's also the reason, keep your clipper sharp, so when you do make that cut, it's a good, clean cut, and you don't have all that little fuzz on here. There's a lot of good diagrams on pruning for different shapes, where to cut, when to cut, age of cut, whether you want a central leader, a modified leader, a vase shape. So my trees, when I put it in, I look at how it wants to grow, and I try to match my pruning to its growth style. I don't say, oh, I want all open vase trees, or I want all central leaders, because you don't always get that. Trying to force it, yeah, so if you're running a commercial orchard, yeah, you want to force it into their central leader development, but I just take it as it is. And what, yeah, I'll get to the end of it here. So when you prune, usually a horizontal branch will produce far more fruit than a vertical branch. And so, yeah, I'll go through, you can see, I stake mine out. And I try different things, and again, that's where the flagging comes in. I use fishing weights that I'll hang on a branch to pull it down a little, but then you gotta remember to come back and take all those back off. I use bamboo stakes that I'll zip tie or Velcro to straighten out a branch, so. But you get far more production out of a horizontal branch. So rarely do we get enough sun, but the shadowing effect on branches does a good job of showing you how much light is gonna get through your tree and what, and where you have little open areas for putting ladders in and what. It just gives you a good idea, so use all those resources. I'll generally go through and I'll work through a tree, and then I get down off the ladder and take a look at it and see, okay, is there anything else I want to change, or did I miss something or whatever? And then I'll go back to it like 2 weeks later again and take one more final look. Yeah, a great example of what not to do. So when you leave those shoots, when you just give it kind of a crew cut type effect, yeah, you end up with more shoots than you gotta. It's a never-ending battle thing. You're always gonna be fighting to cut those shoots off and keep things clean. Thinning fruit, I grow mainly apple trees, and so Jeannie and I press a lot of cider. And so when I thin, you can see apples generally grow in clusters of 5. And commercially, they have a spray, you can spray your tree, and it just leaves that king, that main apple flower on, and all the others will fall off. And so they thin that way. I go through and I'll generally thin kind of upper right here, to 1 to 2 fruits. And I thin whatever I can stand on the ground. I'm not a big fan of ladders. So I thin everything that I can reach on the ground to 1 or 2, and that's all our eating apples and baking apples and applesauce apples and what. And then everything else, the ones I can't reach, yeah, I don't bother thinning those, but I press all that. And so when I press, I'm grinding them up. I don't care what they look like or how they are. So yeah, it makes it a lot easier. But also, so if you see how they're clustered, where the apples touch each other is generally where you'll start getting infestations of bugs or whatever. So thinning is good to help promote better apple size and fewer bugs in the apples. Spraying, I've got a link to a good calendar for sprays. I don't spray a lot. If I do spray, I use like a lime sulfur spray or an insecticidal soap spray. I've got mine down to every 4 or 5 years is when I have to spray, because I go through and I peel off all those little leaves. I look for all the bug cases, and you know, if you keep it clean and then you clean up under the tree, you have to spray far less. Fertilizer. So I dabble in that. I don't irrigate my trees except when I plant them. Yeah, I irrigate them to get them started, but I don't water them. I don't water my established trees. I let those go and have nature go through it. Fertilizer, I'm dabbling with a little bit. Potassium I found makes just adds more sugar and better flavor to the fruit. I use a little diatomaceous earth to bring the pH back up. We have a lot of Doug fir trees, and so I'm out of time. I'm getting close. All right, so in the sprouts, you can see if you get a sprout that's 18 inches to 2 feet, generally it's a healthy tree. So you don't have to do much. WSU offers this leaf tissue sample. If you wanted to send them samples of your leaves, usually in that mid-July time frame, they'll actually analyze it and send you back a report as to here's what your tree needs or doesn't need or whatever. Yeah, there is a cost to that, but there's a link. Yeah, Jeannie's gonna go through that. Other things that like trees, like fruit, yeah. So this is the main one that Mary's gonna have these online, the resources that I have. And I spell out the URLs, so if you can't just touch the link, all these are live, and hopefully you can just click on them, but I also write them out. That fruit tree calendar, yeah, good thing if you want to see what's going on throughout the year, that's a great one. And also this Plant Amnesty website. They have videos in there that will go through pruning. I think they have like 12 different pruning videos in there. They use 3 cuts. They say they do heading cuts, thinning cuts. And then they say they have these selective thinning cuts. Well, in my mind, it's a thinning cut, you know, why make 3 out of them? But you can see, yeah, there's things on sprays, there's things on fertilizers, there's links on fruit selection, yeah, tissue samples. So, questions? Go ahead.
Is it too late now to prune your
No.
apple trees? Okay, that's my first question. My second question is, 2 years ago, I bought 2 cherry trees. The berry ones that you buy, you know, they're just a big stick. They're still a big stick. They haven't, am I supposed to do something to them?
So they haven't started branching or anything?
No, there's no branching at all.
Part of it was the first year, deers chomped the
Oh,
top off.
well, okay, so, yeah, you got predators in
Yeah.
there, so give it another year and see what it does.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna have to see what the branching does. The deer probably took that
Took the
leader off
top
the top.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
so you gotta figure that out.
okay.
Yeah, just not, There's a question over here.
My question was the same as his.
Okay.
But
Others? Go ahead.
Yeah, your Calamar trees,
Yeah,
how do you prune those, or do you? Because they just have the little hooks that go out.
so you wanna actually protect that leader. And if the deer come and eat your leader, yeah, you wanna take that upper next branch, and what I did is I put a piece of bamboo there and staked it up, so I now have a new leader. But the little shoots coming out should only come out about 3 feet,
Okay.
and, yeah, they shouldn't get much bigger.
Longer than that.
If they do start going past that, yeah, then you wanna maybe look at your heading cuts and what to keep them back in. So,
Thank you.